It was one of those grey mornings where everything felt heavier. The rain wasn't loud, just steady, tapping against the diner windows like a quiet metronome. Camille was behind the counter, tying her apron with one hand, while the other cradled a lukewarm coffee she hadn't had time to finish. She had barely slept. Her little brother had another night of coughing fits, and the heating in their apartment was starting to die again. But rent was due next week, so here she was, wiping down the same old booths in that same old corner diner that smelled like burnt bacon and stale pie crust. Just before her shift ended, she spotted it, a wallet left behind in booth 6. It was thick, not just any wallet, the kind you'd expect a lawyer or hedge fund guy to carry. Leather, worn, but clearly expensive. She opened it carefully, glancing around like someone might yell "gotcha" at any second. Inside were several crisp $100 bills, a black platinum card and an ID. Miles Carter. The name sounded vaguely familiar, maybe from the news or one of those donation plaques in the children's wing at the hospital. Camille froze. $800. That was nearly 2 months' rent, enough to cover her brother's next appointment, enough to fix the heat, enough to maybe breathe. She looked around this diner again. It was empty. Just her, the hum of the fridge, and that thick wallet in her hands. For a second, just 1 second, she imagined what it'd feel like to take the money. Not out of greed, but out of desperation. No one saw, no one would know. No, but then, like muscle memory, her mum's voice echoed in her head. You don't build a life on things that don't belong to you, even if the world's unfair. Her jaw clenched. She walked to the back, wrote a quick note. Found this in booth 6. Hope it finds its way back. And handed it all to her manager before leaving through the kitchen door. No big scene, no applause, just rain, wet sneakers, and the quiet ache of having done the right thing when it would have been so easy not to. She thought that was the end of it. But someone was already watching, and this simple act, one small moment no one else would have noticed, was about to rewrite everything. Camille didn't think about the wallet again, not really. There was too much else going on. Her brother Dylan had another appointment that week. The doctor mentioned surgery this time. Insurance barely covered anything, and every new scan came with a bill that made her chest tighten. She worked a double shift the next day, then picked up a Sunday morning slot from a girl who was sick. There wasn't room in her life for wondering about strangers and lost wallets. But 2 days later someone came back. It was a Friday afternoon, the slow kind where sunlight filtered through the blinds and made everything look softer than it really was. Camille was refilling the ketchup bottles when the doorbell chimed. A man walked in, mid-50s maybe, jeans, flannel shirt, no watch, no phone in hand. He didn't look like the guy on the ID, at least not at first glance. The photo in the wallet had shown a clean-shaven man in a suit. This one had some grey at his temples and a tired kindness in his eyes. He sat in booth 6. Camille didn't think much of it, just smiled politely and brought him water. "Been here before?" she asked, casually wiping the table. "Once," he said, voice low but steady. "Left something behind." She gave a small laugh. "You wouldn't believe how many people do that here." He didn't offer more, just looked out the window for a while, like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere. He came back the next Friday, and the one after that. He always ordered the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, dry toast. Never asked for anything special, never flirted, never made her uncomfortable. Camille started to look forward to those Fridays more than she cared to admit. Not because of anything romantic, she wasn't wired for that right now, but because there was something calming about him. He listened when she talked, really listened, asked questions about her brother, about how she juggled classes at night, about whether she still liked painting. She hadn't told anyone about painting in months. He never told her who he really was, never mentioned the wallet, the note, or the name Miles Carter. And that was the thing, he didn't need to. There was a softness in his silence, a respect she wasn't used to. Most people wanted something, he just showed up. And in a life where everything felt like a transaction, shifts for rent, favours for time, pain for progress, his presence felt different. Camille didn't know yet, but that quiet man in booth 6 was carrying more than a name. He was carrying a decision, one that would change both their lives, in ways neither of them saw coming. By the 4th week, it had become a routine. Fridays meant Camille would brew a fresh pot of the good coffee, not the burnt leftovers they usually gave late customers, and Miles would always arrive just after 4, like clockwork. She never asked his name, he never gave it. They both seemed to like it that way. There was something safe in the quiet between them. Sometimes they talked. Not a lot, not about deep things, just weather, music, random stories about her childhood dog, Benny, or the weird people who came through the diner at 2 a.m. Camille had a way of telling stories that made even the mundane feel warm, like you were sitting beside a fireplace. Other times, they'd just sit. She'd wipe the counters, he'd sip his coffee. Occasionally, she'd slide him an extra slice of pie on the house. He always left a tip that was generous but not suspicious. He was never intrusive, never asked too much, just present, steady. And Camille? She didn't realise it, but she'd started saving her better jokes for Fridays. Her smile lasted longer. Her steps felt a little lighter after their short chats. One afternoon, as she poured him a refill, he looked up and asked gently, "What would you be doing right now, if life had gone the way you planned?" Camille blinked. No one ever asked her that. "I'd be in my last year of college," she said after a beat. "Finance major, maybe an internship in the city, living in a shoebox apartment I couldn't afford, but pretending like I had it all figured out." He nodded, saying nothing. She added, quieter this time, but things didn't go that way. Her brother's accident, their mother's second job that ended in chronic pain, the medical bills, dropping out just one semester in. She didn't give the full story. She didn't have to. The way her voice caught on the word accident told him enough. Miles didn't try to fix anything. He didn't offer advice or pity. He just sat with it, with her. And in a world full of people who only half listened, Camille found herself drawn to the quietness of someone who didn't rush her pain or make it about himself. What she didn't know was that every word she shared stuck with him. Not just because he cared, but because for the first time in years, he was starting to feel something he hadn't in a long time. Connection. He didn't say it aloud, but as he left the diner that evening and stepped out into the fading autumn light, Miles Carter made a silent promise. If there was a way to help her, really help her, without taking anything from her dignity, he would find it. The following Friday, Camille didn't come in. At first, Miles thought maybe she had the day off. Maybe she'd swapped shifts or just needed a break. But the way the other waitress moved behind the counter, frazzled and alone, told him otherwise. "She okay?" he asked gently when the young cook came out to bus a table. The kid shrugged. "Her brother's back in the hospital. She called out last minute." Miles nodded, said nothing else, but his hand paused on the coffee mug. That evening, he didn't finish his toast. He sat in booth 6 longer than usual, staring out the rain-blurred window, watching the headlights smear across the glass like watercolour. He thought about the way Camille's eyes lit up when she spoke about her brother, Dylan, how he used to love math, how he wanted to be an engineer, how she'd promised him once that when he got better, she'd take him to see the big bridges in New York. And now he was back in the hospital. Again. Miles had resources, money, connections. But he also had rules. Ones he'd set after years of watching people cling to him only because of his name. If he ever gave someone something, it had to come without strings, without expectations, without changing how they saw themselves. That night, he made a quiet call. Not to Camille, not even to her manager, but to someone on the board of a charity he'd helped build years ago, one that covered emergency medical bills for families who fell through the cracks of insurance. "I need you to pull a file," he said, "and I need you to cover it, full cost. Use the community fund, no direct attribution." The voice on the other end didn't ask questions, they knew better. By the time Camille walked into the hospital the next morning, expecting another round of payment plans and paperwork, the woman at the front desk smiled softly and said, "Everything's already been handled." Camille blinked. "What do you mean? Who?" "It came through a private foundation," the woman said. "Anonymous sponsor." Camille stood there, clutching her brother's coat in her arms, unsure whether to cry or question it. In the end, she just whispered thank you to no one in particular. She didn't know that miles away, a man was sitting in an empty office with a worn photograph of his own daughter on the desk, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this was the first right thing he'd done in a long time. And he didn't need her to know it was him. Not yet. All he wanted was to make sure she could breathe. By the time Camille returned to work the following week, the rain had let up, but the air still smelled like winter was on its way. She looked tired, more than usual. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook just a little when she poured the first pot of coffee. But there was also something softer in her face, like a weight had been lifted, if only for a moment. Miles watched her from his usual booth, pretending to read the newspaper he never actually opened. She didn't see him at first. Her focus was on catching up, wiping down menus, apologising to regulars for being gone. No one asked too many questions. When she finally did notice him, her eyes flickered with something familiar. Relief, maybe even gratitude, though she didn't know why. "Hey, stranger," she said, sliding his coffee over without him asking. "Welcome back," he replied. They didn't mention the hospital. They didn't need to. Camille worked her shift like always. But that afternoon, just before the lunch rush, her manager called her over and handed her a plain envelope. "No return address," he said, shrugging. "Someone dropped it off while you were out, said it was for you." She turned it over, just her first name, nothing else. Inside was a neatly folded letter and a printed packet. The letter was typed, signed only as a friend. The message was simple. "We heard about your situation and admire your strength. You've been awarded a full scholarship to complete your business degree online, on your schedule. Enclosed is your login, course selection and stipend information. You've already proven your work ethic. This is just to open the next door." Camille stood frozen by the ice machine, reading it twice. Then again, her throat tightened. This had to be a mistake, or a prank, or something too good to be real. She looked around the diner. No one was watching her, except the man in booth 6. He smiled when their eyes met. Just enough to be kind, just enough to say, "I see you." But he didn't say a word. And Camille didn't ask, because some part of her, the quiet, unspoken part, already knew. But whether he was behind it or not, she folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her pocket. And for the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself a thought she hadn't dared believe in for years. Maybe, just maybe, she could still have a future. The following Monday, Camille sat cross-legged on the faded couch in her tiny apartment, laptop balanced on her knees, her brother Dylan snoring softly in the next room. The screen glowed with her course dashboard: Intro to Financial Markets, Fundamentals of Accounting, Business Ethics. It all felt surreal. She hadn't touched this part of her life in over 3 years. College was supposed to be behind her, something she'd shelved next to the paintbrushes she didn't have time to use anymore. But now there it was, waiting. And she didn't have to quit the diner. The program was flexible, online. The stipend covered books and internet. Whoever set this up had thought it through. And still she didn't know who. Part of her wanted to ask. To trace it back, figure out who had reached into her life and pushed open a door she thought was sealed shut. But the other part, the deeper part, didn't want to spoil it. Because this quiet kind of help, felt like a rare kind of kindness. The kind that didn't expect a thank you card or a shout out on social media. The kind that just wanted her to have a shot. And maybe that was enough. At the diner, Miles still came every Friday. He never brought it up, not once. But the way he looked at her, with that steady, encouraging calm, made her wonder if he knew more than he let on. One evening, after the rush had died down and the jukebox was playing some old Bruce Springsteen song in the corner, she sat across from him for the first time. Not standing, not rushing. Just sat. "I used to think I'd missed my window," she said, stirring her tea. "Like maybe life just decided for me." Miles didn't interrupt, he didn't need to. "But lately," she went on, softer now, "I'm starting to think maybe it's not too late. Maybe there's more ahead than I thought." He smiled at that. "Sometimes the second window's better anyway," he said. "Comes with a clearer view." Camille laughed, quietly, like she didn't want to scare it away. She didn't know that Miles had been watching her progress behind the scenes, quietly checking in with the scholarship board, reading her midterm reports, making sure no one pulled the rug out from under her again. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because she reminded him of someone he used to know, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. His daughter fall melted into winter. Camille's routine shifted, but not drastically. Mornings still meant tired feet and stiff coffee pots. Nights still meant cooking for Dylan and quietly checking her course dashboard in the glow of the kitchen light. But now, she walked a little taller. Her laughter came easier. And Miles? He kept showing up. Same booth, same coffee, same quiet presence. Only now, when Camille spoke, he listened deeper. And when she didn't, when she just sat across from him, sipping tea and staring out at the snowy street, he didn't try to fill the silence. They had settled into something, not friendship exactly, not mentorship either. Something in between, something real. One Friday, just after closing, Camille sat across from him again. The lights had dimmed. Her apron was off. The street outside was coated in slush. You always ask about me, she said, eyes steady. But you never talk about yourself. Miles chuckled. It wasn't defensive, just tired. There's not much to tell, he replied. I don't buy that. He looked down, tracing the rim of his coffee cup with one finger. After a moment, he said quietly, I have a daughter. Camille didn't speak, just waited. She hasn't spoken to me in years, he went on. Not since the divorce. I thought I was doing everything right, building a life, building something she could be proud of. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing what she needed. I only saw what I was trying to give. His voice didn't crack, but something in his face did. Camille said nothing for a long while. Then, do you miss her? Miles nodded once. Every day. She leaned back in the booth, arms crossed loosely. Maybe she misses you too. People hold hurt in strange ways. Doesn't mean the door's closed. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since they met, he felt the sting of being truly seen. I'm not saying it's easy, she added, almost like a whisper, but maybe you start small, the same way you showed up here. Miles smiled at that, not wide, but soft, grateful. You know, he said after a beat, you're a lot wiser than people probably give you credit for. Camille smirked. Yeah, well, life kind of forces that on you when you can't afford therapy. They both laughed, and it wasn't the kind that fades fast. It was warm, lingered, and somewhere in that laughter something between them shifted. Not into romance, not into obligation, just into trust. Two people from very different worlds, both learning how to rebuild, one Friday at a time. By the start of spring, Camille had finished her second course. She passed with high marks, not because she was naturally gifted, though she was, but because she'd studied in the quiet corners of the diner on her breaks, with flashcards tucked between receipt slips and textbooks resting under trays of lemon pie. No one at the diner really knew what she was working toward. Most just saw a kind girl with a tired smile and a good heart. But Miles saw more. He saw discipline, he saw drive. So when an internship opening came up at the Carter Foundation, remote, part-time, flexible hours, he sent in a recommendation. He didn't tell her about it right away. He didn't want her to feel like it was charity, didn't want to take away her sense of earning it. But when the email landed in her inbox, subject line, "We'd love to meet you," she stood completely still in the back hallway of the diner, one hand gripping the wall, the other holding her phone. She reread the name 3 times before it clicked. Carter Foundation. Her breath caught. And then it all snapped into place. The wallet, the booth, the scholarships, the letter with no name, the quiet man in flannel who always listened but never bragged, who asked questions but never answered his own. That afternoon she made 2 phone calls. The first was to accept the internship. The second was to Miles. He picked up after 1 ring. You knew, she said softly, no accusation in her voice, just the calm weight of realization. There was a pause, then, yes. Why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want you to see me, I wanted you to see you. Camille swallowed the lump in her throat. You didn't have to do all that. I know, he said, but I wanted to. You reminded me of what matters. She didn't cry, not then. But she did show up to his booth the next day, with a small box of cupcakes she couldn't really afford, tied with a ribbon she found in an old drawer. Thank you, she said, sliding it across the table. He smiled, touched the box gently. You earned this, every bit of it. She sat down across from him and looked around the diner that had held so many versions of her. The broke girl, the tired sister, the scared dropout, and let herself finally feel the shift. She wasn't leaving the past behind, she was just adding a new chapter. And as for Miles, when he looked at Camille now, he didn't just see the girl who had returned his wallet, he saw hope. Maybe the kind you could still build from, even after everything. The invitation came tucked between junk mail and a dentist reminder card, a cream-coloured envelope with gold lettering addressed to Camille Avery. Inside, a formal letter from the Carter Foundation. She had been invited to their annual gala as a featured young professional. Dress code formal, location downtown ballroom, purpose to honour those who had grown through the foundation's support programmes. Camille almost laughed. She had one dress, black, simple, bought years ago for a cousin's funeral, but it still fit, and that was enough. She didn't plan on going to be seen, she just wanted to sit quietly in the back, thank whoever handed out name tags, and slip out before dessert. But that wasn't what happened. When she arrived, the room was warm with golden light. Strings of soft music drifted in the background, and waiters in tuxedos passed around tiny plates of food she couldn't pronounce. She felt small for a moment, out of place, until she saw him, Miles, across the room, dressed in a classic black suit, talking to someone near the stage. He looked like he belonged there, calm, composed. But when he saw her, his face softened. He nodded once, as if to say, "You're exactly where you're meant to be." The speeches began soon after, donors, board members, directors. Then the MC paused and introduced the final speaker of the night. "Miles Carter," she said, "has led this foundation for over 2 decades, but tonight he has something more personal to share." Camille froze. Miles took the stage, holding no notes, just the microphone and a quiet smile. "I've spent most of my life building things," he began. "Companies, programs, strategies, but lately I've been thinking more about the people who build us." He paused, scanning the crowd. Not the ones with titles or resumes, the ones who show up, who work hard, who remind us that strength doesn't always raise its voice. Camille felt her breath catch. "There's someone here tonight," Miles continued, "who changed my life. Though she probably doesn't think of it that way, she found something I lost, gave it back without asking for anything in return, and in doing that reminded me of a version of myself I thought I'd buried a long time ago." People in the audience were looking around now. Miles smiled. "She's bright, she's kind, and she's going to change the world, not because someone gave her a shortcut, but because she refused to quit." Then simply, "Camille, would you stand for a moment?" Every head turned, a spotlight swept the room. She stood slowly, heart pounding, cheeks flushed. But she held her head high, not for the applause, not for the recognition, but because in that moment she realised something. She hadn't just made it through, she had become someone worth honouring. And the man who had helped her, the one who had seen her when no one else had, was finally letting the world see her too. A year passed. Camille didn't leave the diner entirely, not right away. She still picked up weekend shifts, not because she needed the tips anymore, but because it kept her grounded. She liked the routine, the smell of fresh coffee, the clatter of plates, the comfort of a place that had once been her whole world. But on weekdays she now worked downtown in an office with big windows and a badge that said Junior Analyst, Carter Foundation. She had her own desk, her own business card, her own sense of belonging. Dylan was doing better too. His health was more stable, his laugh came easier. They even visited that big bridge in New York last summer, just the two of them like she'd promised. And Miles? He had stepped down from the foundation's board but stayed involved in his quiet, steady way. He and Camille met for coffee twice a month. No fanfare. Just long conversations, quiet updates, and sometimes shared silence that didn't feel empty. One rainy Tuesday, Camille left work late. The city was slick with light and traffic. She ducked into a small diner near the subway to wait out the weather. The place reminded her of where she started. Checkered floors, neon signs, tired servers. As she sipped her tea, she noticed a worn leather wallet on the seat across from her. Someone had left it behind. She opened it gently. No cash inside this one. Just a few credit cards, a folded bus pass, and a photo of a little girl in a Halloween costume. Camille didn't hesitate. She waved down the waitress and handed it over with a note she scribbled on a napkin. "Found this in the booth. Hope it makes its way back home. See." As she walked out into the drizzle, she didn't expect anything to come of it. But her smile lingered, because sometimes the most powerful things you do aren't the loud ones. They're the quiet choices, the moments no one sees that shape who you are. Camille had returned a wallet once, and a man had returned something far greater in return: belief, direction, a future. Now it was her turn to pass it on, and she would, again and again, not for applause, but because it was simply who she'd become. This story is a quiet reminder that doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, still matters. That kindness doesn't always come with a spotlight, but it echoes, it finds its way back. Camille didn't help for a reward, and Miles didn't give to be seen. But somehow they both walked away with something deeper: peace, connection, and the kind of quiet dignity you can't buy. Sometimes the world doesn't change in big moments. Sometimes it changes in a booth over coffee with someone who simply listens. And that's enough. Thank you so much for watching all the way to this moment. It truly means the world to me. Every view, every comment, it's something I don't take for granted. If this story touched you in any way, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment to let me know you were here. Your support helps keep these quiet stories alive. I'll see you again right here on Rain Inside. Take care, and until next time.